Have you ever wondered why some people seem stuck in the past, unable to shake off a horrific experience that keeps haunting their every day? Why do certain memories cling so tightly that they shape not just the mind, but the body itself? Bessel van der Kolk, a renowned psychiatrist, takes us on a gripping journey through these questions in his book, The Body Keeps the Score. With decades of research and hands-on experience, he reveals how trauma doesn't just live in our thoughts, it rewires our brains, alters our bodies, and changes how we move through the world. This isn't a story just for those who have faced trauma, it's for anyone curious about what makes us human. Let's dive into this exploration of how trauma leaves its mark and the surprising ways we can heal. Picture this. It's 1978, and a disheveled Vietnam veteran named Tom bursts into van der Kolk's new office at the Boston Veterans Administration Clinic. He's a mess, hungover, agitated, clutching a copy of Soldier of Fortune magazine. Tom had spent the 4th of July weekend holed up in his law office, drinking alone, avoiding his family. Why? Because the fireworks, the summer heat, the chatter of his kids, it all yanked him back to the jungles of Vietnam. He'd lash out, storm off, or ride his Harley at breakneck speeds just to feel some control. Nightmares plagued him, vivid replays of an ambush where his platoon was slaughtered. He'd see dead Vietnamese children in his mind, feel the terror all over again. During the day, flashbacks hit without warning. A car backfiring could send him diving for cover as if he were still in a rice paddy. Tom's story is our first window into a truth van der Kolk hammers home. Trauma isn't just a bad memory you can shrug off. It's a physical force that digs into your brain and body, leaving you on edge, ready to fight or flee at the slightest trigger. Van der Kolk saw this in Tom's brain scans, where the amygdala, the brain's fear alarm, lit up like a siren, while the prefrontal cortex, the part that calms you down and thinks things through, was dim and quiet. This imbalance meant Tom was stuck in survival mode, his body reacting as if the war never ended. Ever wonder why some folks jump at loud noises or freeze up in crowds? This is why. Their brains are wired to see danger everywhere. But it's not just war veterans like Tom who carry this burden. Trauma hits closer to home than we'd like to admit. Van der Kolk shares jaw-dropping stats. 1 in 5 Americans was sexually molested as a child. 1 in 4 beaten hard enough to leave marks. 1 in 3 couples tangled in physical violence. 1/4 of us grew up with alcoholics, and 1 in 8 saw their mom get hit. These numbers aren't from some far-off place. They're us, our neighbors, our families. And the effects, they ripple out, messing with our health, our relationships, even how long we live. Take Marilyn, a woman van der Kolk met who'd been sexually abused by her father as a kid. She grew up in a house that looked normal on the outside, but inside it was a nightmare. To cope, she'd disconnect, mentally check out of her body when the abuse happened. As an adult, she couldn't feel close to anyone. Intimacy felt numb, relationships fell apart, and she'd cut herself just to feel something real. Her brain had adapted to survive, but at a cost. The hippocampus, which helps process memories, was smaller than it should have been, scrambled by stress hormones from those early years. Her body was stuck, too tense, on guard, like it was still waiting for the next blow. This is where van der Kolk's work gets wild. He shows how trauma isn't just in your head, it's in your muscles, your gut, your heartbeat. He talks about the autonomic nervous system, the behind-the-scenes wiring that flips between calm and chaos. In a healthy person, it's like a well-tuned orchestra. Your heart beats steady, your breath flows easy. But for someone like Marilyn, it's a broken record of panic. The sympathetic nervous system, the gas pedal for fight or flight, is jammed on, while the parasympathetic side, which should hit the brakes, barely works. Ever feel your heart race for no reason? That's your body keeping the score of something you might not even remember. Now, here's a question that'll stick with you. If trauma changes us so deeply, how do we change it back? Kolk doesn't settle for the usual answers. Sure, talking about it helps, traditional therapy has its place, but he argues it's not enough. Trauma lives below words, in the parts of the brain that feel and react before you can think. So, he digs into the science and pulls out stories that show how the body itself can lead the way to healing. One of those stories is about Maria, a woman who'd been abused as a child and couldn't shake the flashbacks. She'd tried talk therapy for years, but it was like trying to fix a flooded basement with a mop. Nothing stuck. Then Kolk introduced her to something called EMDR, or eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It sounds bizarre at first. You recall a traumatic memory while following a therapist's finger moving side to side with your eyes. But it worked for Maria. After a few sessions, those memories lost their sting. She could think about them without her body freaking out. Studies back this up. Kolk cites one where EMDR beat out medication for some PTSD patients. Why? Maybe it mimics how your brain processes stuff during sleep, weaving those jagged memory shards into something smoother. Then there's yoga, which might surprise you as a trauma fix. Kolk tells us about Sarah, not her real name, but her story's real enough. She'd been assaulted and felt like her body wasn't hers anymore. Touch freaked her out. She couldn't sense her own emotions. In yoga classes at Kolk's trauma center, she started slow, breathing, gentle poses, no pressure. Over time, she noticed her feet on the mat, her chest rising and falling. She began to trust her body again, to feel alive in it. Research showed her heart rate variability, a fancy term for how flexible your heart is under stress, got better, a sign her nervous system was calming down. Yoga gave her a way to befriend her body, not fight it. And how about neurofeedback? This one's straight out of sci-fi. Kolk met John, a vet with PTSD so bad he tried everything and still couldn't sleep. They hooked him up to an EEG machine to watch his brain waves, then had him play a game on a screen that only moved when his brain chilled out, more alpha waves, less frantic theta ones. After a bunch of sessions, John felt calmer, slept better, didn't snap as much. It's like retraining your brain's wiring bit by bit. Kolk's team found a 30% drop in PTSD symptoms with this stuff, pretty impressive when pills alone often fail. But it's not all high-tech or solo work. Healing's got a social side, too. Kolk takes us to a theater program for troubled teens, kids who'd seen violence or neglect. They put on plays, like Shakespeare or their own stories, and something clicked. One kid, playing Macbeth, channeled his anger into the role instead of a fist fight. Another found trust in the group, a rare thing when you've been betrayed young. Kolk ties this to communal rhythms, think drumming or dancing together, which sync us up with others and soothe that jumpy nervous system. Ever notice how a good song with friends can lift you out of a funk? That's the magic he's talking about. Let's step back for a sec and see the bigger picture. The Body Keeps the Score isn't just a collection of cool fixes, it's a map of trauma's territory. Kolk splits it into 5 parts, each peeling back another layer. First, he rediscovers trauma through vets like Tom, showing how it's been ignored or misunderstood forever. Think shell shock in World War I getting dismissed as cowardice. Then he dives into the brain on trauma, how it scrambles your wiring, from the amygdala to the vagus nerve that ties your gut to your feelings. Next, he zooms in on kids like Marilyn and how early wounds shape everything, your trust, your health, even your imagination. After that, it's the imprint of trauma, memories that won't quit, stuck in your body like a bad tattoo. Finally, paths to recovery, EMDR, yoga, theater, and more, ways to rewrite that script. Kids, though, man, that's where it gets heavy. Kolk digs into the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, or ACE. It's a gut punch of data. The more bad stuff you face young, abuse, neglect, a drunk parent, the worse your odds get later. High ACE scores mean more depression, heart disease, even early death. One stat hit me hard. Folks with a score of 4 or more are 12 times more likely to try suicide. That's not just a number. It's lives unraveling because no one stepped in soon enough. He argues we're missing this epidemic. Schools, doctors, even shrinks often slap labels like ADHD on these kids instead of seeing the trauma underneath. So, why does this matter? Because trauma's not rare. It's woven into our society, costing us billions in healthcare, jails, lost potential. Kolk's not just describing it, he's yelling for us to wake up. He's spent his life founding the trauma center, treating thousands, figuring out what works when the old ways flop. Talk therapy's great, but when your body's screaming, you need more. That's why he's all about mixing it up, top down with words, bottom up with movement, even meds if they fit. No one size fits all here. It's about what clicks for you. Let's circle back to Tom, the vet who started us off. His loyalty to his dead buddies kept him trapped. He wouldn't take pills to stop the nightmares, feeling it'd betray them. That shame, that numbness, it's a thread Kolk follows through every story. Trauma steals your sense of self, leaves you floating, disconnected. Tom's rage at home, Marilyn's cuts, Maria's flashbacks, they are all the body crying out what the mind can't say. But here's the hope, those same bodies can heal. Tom found some peace on his Harley, a hint of what movement can do. Maria got her life back with EMDR. Sarah felt her breath again. John slept. What's wilder is how Kolk ties this to us as a species. We're tough, bouncing back from wars, disasters, betrayals since forever. But trauma's traces linger in our families, our genes, our culture. He nods to the polyvagal theory, this idea from Stephen Porges about how our vagus nerve flips between connection and shutdown. When it's stuck in danger mode, we're cut off from others, from ourselves. Healing's about flipping that switch back, feeling safe enough to engage again. Ever think about why a hug feels so good after a rough day? That's your vagus nerve saying, "You're okay now." This book's packed with moments that make you pause, like Ute, a car crash survivor who froze during the wreck and couldn't feel her body right after. Her brain scans showed her sensory areas shut down, trauma literally numbed her to herself. Or Bill, a vet turned preacher, who saw dying kids in Vietnam every time his baby cried. They almost locked him up as psychotic, but Kolk saw it as memory breaking through. These aren't just cases, they're proof trauma's a whole body deal, not just a mind game. And the therapies, they're not fluff. Kolk's got data, brain scans, studies, years of watching patients. EMDR's got clinical trials showing it outpaces some drugs. Yoga's got numbers on heart rate variability climbing, PTSD scores dropping, neurofeedback's cutting symptoms by 1/3 in his own research. Theater, it's less about stats and more about kids finding their voice, but the change is real, teens who couldn't trust anyone start leaning on a crew. It's science meeting soul, and it works. But let's not gloss over the dark stuff. Trauma's messy. Kolk doesn't shy from the shame, like Tom's guilt over a revenge rampage after his buddy Alex died, killing and raping in a Vietnamese village, or Marilyn's self-loathing, blaming herself for her dad's abuse. That's the kicker. Trauma often makes you hate yourself as much as the thing that hurt you. It's why healing's so hard, you're fighting your own mind telling you you're broken. Still, there's light. Kolk's big on imagination, how trauma kills it but recovery brings it back. Kids who have been hurt stop dreaming, stop playing. But give them a stage, a yoga mat, a chance to move, and that spark flickers again. He saw it in a girl named Lisa, abused young, who used neurofeedback to quiet her brain's chaos and started picturing a future. Or in foster kids with the Possibility Project, turning their pain into plays and finding hope. Ever lose yourself in a story and feel better? That's the power he's chasing. The book's not short on big ideas either. Beyond the deep dives, van der Kolk sketches out trauma's history, how we went from calling it hysteria in the 1800s to PTSD in the 80s. He nods to pioneers like Pierre Janet, who saw trauma as a physical freeze long before scans proved it. And he covers brain basics, how the limbic system, that emotional core, gets hijacked, leaving the rational neocortex out of the loop. It's not all heavy, though. He keeps it human, weaving in his own story, like growing up with a raging dad who'd survived a Nazi camp, pushing him to ask these questions. What about the everyday stuff? Van der Kolk doesn't dwell long on every chapter, but he gives us the gist. There's a bit on how kids need attunement, think a mom mirroring a baby's coos to build a steady self. Without it, you're lost, like Marilyn was. He skims memory's quirks, how trauma sticks as raw sensation, not a neat tale. And he touches on self-leadership, this idea of taming your inner chaos, though he digs deeper into that with therapies like internal family systems, where you talk to your parts, the hurt kid, the angry protector, to find peace. So where's this all land? The body keeps the score, says trauma's not a life sentence. It's a brutal teacher, sure, carving itself into your brain's circuits, your body's rhythms. But we're built to bounce back, and van der Kolk's handing us tools, science-backed, body-first tricks to reclaim ourselves. From Tom's Harley rides to Maria's eye movements, Sarah's yoga breaths to John's brain games, it's about feeling alive again, not just surviving. And it's bigger than one person. He's calling out society to see trauma for what it is, to catch kids before they fall through the cracks. Think about this. What if the next time you see someone lose it over something small, you wonder what their body's keeping score of? Or if you tried breathing deep when you're stressed, feeling your feet on the ground? Van der Kolk's not promising miracles, but he's showing us we've got more power over this than we think. Trauma's a thief, stealing safety, joy, connection. Yet with the right moves, we can steal it back, one heartbeat, one story, one step at a time. That's the heart of this book, a tough truth, a wild hope, and a hell of a fight worth joining.